thanks again and welcome to today's Tackling GDPR One Bite at a Time webinar. So today we're going to give you an in-depth overview of how GDPR will help your business and also ways in which OnePageCRM will help you to comply as well. And in addition to that, Philipa Jane Farley will also be showing you how to do a legitimate interest assessment. So thanks again to everyone that submitted some questions before the session. We will be covering those towards the very end, and we would welcome you to ask any questions during today's session as well. So you can type them in the chat window or in the dedicated Q&A box as well. So as you know, GDPR, the deadline is 10 days away. The way we came up with the name for today's session was because with a bit of South African influence, and you'll realize that once you hear from Andrea and Philipa, as they're both South African natives. And a saying in South Africa is, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. So I think that's the connection between GDPR being this big elephant in the room, and just kind of start at it bit by bit, and it'll make it a lot easier to explain and understand. So myself, I'm head of customer success here in OnePageCRM, and we're getting lots and lots of queries, and just people generally just asking questions. How can I be more compliant? Is your privacy policy up to date? And lots of questions. So what I will be discussing today is giving you an overview of different features within OnePageCRM that will help you be GDPR compliant. We also have Andrea Manning, who's heading up our GDPR compliance here on OnePageCRM. So Andrea has been very much working to get things done here and make sure that we're getting all our policies in place, our procedures, and that we're updating everything as we go along. So she's been working tirelessly there. And then we're delighted to have Philipa Jane Farley as well join us. And she's a data protection and privacy law specialist. So her background would be rooted in South African constitutional law and contract law as well. So in-depth experience there, and also she's been obviously heavily involved in GDPR compliance here in Ireland and getting it implemented for SMEs especially. So she will give you more insights on all of that in a few moments. Just something to mention is that the information in this presentation is purely for information purposes only. So we would always recommend that you would seek your own legal advice, because your businesses vary and different instances and all of that. So today's agenda, I'll be passing over to Andrea in just a moment to give you an overview of GDPR, the roles, and lawful processing. I'll be mentioning how to utilize the fields in OnePageCRM. Philipa will be showing you how to do a legitimate interest assessment, and we'll be chatting through some of the frequently asked questions we received before today's session, and then we'll have a live Q&A. So thanks again, everyone. Keep the questions and the feedback coming. As far as I hear, Philipa likes hard questions, so make sure to keep her on her toes today. So thanks again.
So we're going to start right at the beginning. Does GDPR apply to you? And it does, regardless of if you're in the EU or outside of the EU. If you've got customers and they are EU citizens and you're storing their data on your CRM, then GDPR does apply to you. So the biggest thing with GDPR is all these new terms that are floating around, and everybody's wondering, what am I, who am I? So the first one is controller versus processor. So a very simple example, I've got a company and I sell yellow hats. And my customer, he is my data subject, or he is a data subject, and every one of us are data subjects. So he comes to me and he buys a hat, and I put his details into my CRM. And now I'm the guardian of his data. I have to look after it. I'm the controller. Now I want to send him his hat, and I use a parcel company. So I print out a label with all his details, and I send all his details over to the parcel company for them to process his order, and they send it to him. So they are the processor. Then the next thing is I want to send him a newsletter. So I take all his details and I send it over to MailChimp, and they send off a newsletter to him. So that makes MailChimp a processor as well. So I hope that makes the distinction between controller and processor simpler. You as our customers, we are the controller of your data. So when you sign up, we get your data, your sign-up details, and we're the guardian of your data, and we don't share it or sell it, we look after it. And when you enter all the data of your contacts into OnePageCRM and you sending us all their details in your CRM system, we are the processor. We're processing that data on your behalf and based on, with your instructions. So your processor has to be GDPR compliant. And we can't bring in other data processors unless we've told you that we're doing so and we've got your permission. And all of this is done within a contract. Now, it might be a data processing agreement. It might be in the terms. Some of it falls under the privacy policy. And we will be bringing out our new terms in the next week or so, which will go into detail about that contract between us and you. We have to keep records of all the processing and provide you with secure processing. And together, you as the controllers and us as the processor, we have a common duties and shared liability now. So GDPR applies to everybody in your organization. You can't be giving one person in the office the task, go off and do GDPR and tick it at the end. So what we did is we made this cheat sheet for everybody, which is up by their phones, just to give them the basics and the terminology and a reminder that every time you do something, you actually have to now put GDPR into your thought process. So we've made one for you as well. Feel free to take it, change it, add your own bits and pieces to it, but it's a great cheat sheet which we'll put up at the end of the webinar. So the biggest thing with GDPR is that it's not just your CRM and it's not just putting everything in one place, because you're going to have to sit and have conversations and decide what information are you going to store in your CRM, who's going to have access to it, and you have to literally sit down and draw a picture and think, where is all your information coming and where is it going? It's the fancy word for it is data mapping, but it is just a big diagram where you can visually see what's going where and then start to make policies and procedures around it. So we've got this thing, tell your salespeople, and it's gather only the data you need and make sure that you've got lawful grounds to process it. The more data you have, the more admin there is, the more risk you're at. And we all, in the old days, would put things in and say, well, I might need that later, or I might need it in the future, or I'll just hang on to that. Those days are gone. You're going to have to get used to deleting. And actually, if you look at all the data you've got, do you actually need it? Why are you keeping their date of birth? You don't need their date of birth. If you want to send them a birthday card, then maybe you just need to keep the birthday, which is the 10th of May. If you're not doing anything with that date of birth, don't keep it. So really be quite ruthless, because the less data you have, the less fields you have, the easier it's going to be able to manage. And then the other thing is you have to be very open about what you're doing, and prepare for data subject requests. So you need to tell your customers what you're going to be doing with their data, why you need it, and then be ready for hopefully not a deluge of subject access requests where people say, well, I want to know everything you've got on me. Send me everything you've got on me. Now, if you've got it in hundreds and hundreds of different places, it's going to cause problems. If you've got lots of duplicates in your system, that's going to cause problems. So having a neat, tidy system with less data is going to make things easier. And then finally, you have to keep your data safe and delete it when you're finished with it. If somebody's no longer a customer and they haven't been a customer for the last 3 years, you shouldn't be holding on to their data. You need to have policies like clean desk policy and you bring your own device to work policies. It's not just about what goes on in your CRM. It's a much, much bigger picture. So this is all what GDPR is. It's all about transparency. And we're going to share a copy of these slides at the end. And I've put all the articles here because there's 99 articles and you couldn't begin to learn all of them. But when you come across one, I've got a link as well to where you can find the details on each article, and then just go through that article step by step until you go, okay, you know what, that's not so bad. And I think that brings us back to our elephant, one bite at a time. Just take Article 13, go and find out what it is, read about it, and then try and implement it into your organization. But you have to be transparent. There's no more hiding. You have to tell people what you're doing. So these are the 6 principles of transparency. Purpose. So you have to tell everybody what you are doing with their data. Why do you need their date of birth? Why do you need their telephone number? What are you going to do with it now and in the future? Legitimate interest. This is one of the reasons how you can store data, and you have to tell them, well, we're doing it because. So you have to disclose your grounds for legitimate interest, and I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail. And the retention period, again, you're expected now to tell your customers how long you're going to keep their data for. Obviously, legal stuff you need to keep for 6 years. But if somebody's a customer and I don't know, you sold them something and there's a warranty period, then you would make a policy within your organization. Well, most people come back within 3 months after the warranty expires, but then after that we don't hear from them. So therefore our retention period for that piece of data is a year plus 3 months. We talked about sending your stuff off to DHL or to MailChimp. So if that's what you're doing, you have to tell your customers where you are sending their data to. And you have to tell them all the safeguards you've put in place. And that's everything from staff training to auditing your processes. And then finally, you need to make it as easy for them to opt out as it was for them to opt in. So if you are sending them information or you're storing their details, if they change their mind, it needs to be really at the click of a button or just by making contact, and they can opt out as easily as they did. So the retention periods, there are no set retention periods in GDPR. You won't, if you go looking, you won't see, oh, well, you know, you're allowed to keep a customer's data for 12 months or you're allowed to keep a lead's data for 3 months. So again, it goes back to the conversations you have to have in your organization. How long do you need to keep something for? And there will be different scenarios, because if you sell a product that's got a 5-year life cycle, then perhaps you need to be looking around that figure. If you're selling a product that's got a 1-week life cycle, then you need to look and decide, well, how much longer after that life cycle of the product do we need to keep their data for? And all of this you put into your privacy policy. And what you do is you become very good at housekeeping, and you set triggers that once something's expired, then you go through your CRM and you delete it. Though you don't need to be keeping those people anymore. There's a myth that you can't transfer data outside of the EU. At the moment, you can. There are 3 ones. One is based on adequacy, where the EU have decided that that country has adequate safeguards in place. And I know New Zealand is one of those. Another one is appropriate safeguards, and this will be things like certifications. And the one that everybody is talking about is the EU-US Privacy Shield. At the moment, with GDPR, they're saying it's okay to transfer to companies in the US if they are governed by the EU-US Privacy Shield. But for your own peace of mind, you still need to audit them and look at why do you need to transfer it out, and you need to let your customers know what you're doing. And the specific derogations is things like if it was a legal case and you had to obviously transfer something to the courts in America, but we're not going to go into that for today. So lawful processing, and you pick one. There are 6 types, 6 reasons that you can store information, store and process information. For the purposes of what you do in your CRM, I'm just going to focus on the 3 in orange. Explicit consent is one. So that is when somebody ticks the box and says, you know, I absolutely agree to you storing my data, or I absolutely agree to you having my data so that you can send me newsletters. It's explicit consent, and there are very clear rules about it. It can't be, I think unambiguous is the word, so you can't hide it. In other words, it needs to be freely given. So you can't say, well, if you want to watch this webinar, you have to give us your consent to send your marketing material. You can't bundle them up. Performance of contract is straightforward. If you need their details to actually do business with them, send them invoices and make updates to their account, then that's performance of contract. And then the one which I'm going to leave to Philipa to cover very nicely is legitimate interest, because it's the one that you could latch on to because it looks nice and easy, and there are gray areas, but you have to go through it, and it's not as easy to get away with. The big one with legitimate interest is that you're balancing up is it in the benefit of the customer and yourself. So I've gone through consent now. These are the ones basically that you really have to follow. It's explicit consent for each purpose of use. So if I want your details to send your marketing materials, does that include phoning you? Does that include sending you special offers? The freely given means to say you can't bundle it up with an offer of something else. Informed, you need to tell them what you're doing. The clear affirmative action is it has to be a tick. They have to actually click on something to say, yes, yes, I consent. And they need to be able to withdraw. So that would be things like in your MailChimp where you have the unsubscribe button. and you need to keep proof that they have given you consent. So you need to log, the date you got it, how you got it, and so legitimate interest. This is a really simple one if you look at it this way. If you want to do something, you think, if I sent this email to this man about doing business with him, would he reasonably expect to receive this? So if I was running a garage and I sold you a car, and 11.5 months later, I sent you an email saying your car's due for a service, would you like to book a service? That would be completely legitimate. If I 6 months later sent you an email about buying new tires that were 25% off, that's not legitimate interest. That's straightforward marketing. So personal data is every piece of data that can be used to uniquely identify a person. So it's not necessarily just name and email address, the obvious, and telephone number. It's things like IP addresses, ID numbers. There's so much research that you can take 2 or 3 pieces of information about a person, anonymous information or what seems anonymous, and join it up to identify them. And then additional to the personal data is special category data, and this is things like trade union memberships, religious beliefs, political beliefs, and frankly, you need consent to store them, and you can't put them in your CRM. There should be no reason for you to have that special category data, and we've detailed that for you as well. So GDPR is all about everybody's rights, and using your CRM, you're going to have to help them, I don't know, can't think of the word, but Carmel's going to demonstrate how you deal with this. So if somebody comes to you and says, I'm exercising my right to erasure, that means they want to be deleted, they want to be obliterated, they want to no longer exist in your system. Right of access is I want to see what you have on me. It doesn't mean get rid of me, I want to know every piece of information you have. And that includes things like personal opinions. So if you're writing in your CRM about a customer that you don't particularly like and is particularly difficult, if they do a subject access request, you do have to give them those notes. Rectification is a simple one. It's just, you've got my details wrong. I want you to be able to change them. Restriction of processing, it's not really relevant for what you do, but it's almost like putting a hold on it. Don't do anything because there might be a court case or something. And portability is I want to take all my data from the CRM and move it somewhere else. The one I always understand is like in Spotify, if I've spent a lot of time making all my playlists, but now I want to move to a different provider, I need to be able to take all my playlists with me. So those are the rights, and you will hear these bandied around a lot more from now on. So now you've probably gone through your database, and there's going to be a lot less people on there. And also you can't just email everybody. So you're going to have to start looking after each lead and nurturing it and making things a lot more personal. And again, Carmel's going to go and demonstrate how you link up your MailChimp sign-up forms or any forms you have on your landing page and link it into your CRM, or within the realms of the new GDPR. So email marketing, this is you've probably had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails in the last few weeks saying, with GDPR coming, we want to get your consent to carry on mailing to you. Do you want to stay subscribed? If you don't stay subscribed, we're going to, we won't be able to mail you anymore. So marketing can either be carried out for consent, where I explicitly say, yes, please send me your details on your special offers on product A every month, or can it be carried out with legitimate interest? And that was the example I gave with the man with the tires. So direct marketing, I've put at the end with the resources, there's a whole set of guidance that the ICO have put out with this one. But you have to have a relevant and appropriate relationship with them. And you have to show that there's a balance of interest between the organization and the person receiving the marketing. And you have to tell them you're marketing to them, and you have to show them how to opt out. So with smaller databases, because we had a seminar a couple of weeks ago and people were talking about having lists of 50,000 people. And then we were saying, well, actually you have to delete those lists because you haven't had any contact with those people for the last 5 years. You can't keep them in your CRM. And I think they were nearly crying. But if you look at Pareto's principle, 80% of your business will come from 20% of your customers. So say get used to deleting and then concentrate on the ones that you have got, because you can actually look after them a lot better. So a lot of people were sending out these emails saying, do you want to stay subscribed? Now, Weatherspoons, they looked at their database of hundreds of thousands of people, and they couldn't prove that they had consent to email them. So they couldn't email them again saying, can we have consent? Because they didn't have consent in the first place. And they actually sent out a blanket email saying to everybody, we're deleting our entire database, and we're now just going to communicate via our website and Facebook and Twitter. Another company actually did it really well, and they showed us a good reason, a good way to, they showed us why they wanted us to stay subscribed. They, the benefits of staying subscribed, they made it really simple with a one-click button, and actually it worked. This one we did resubscribe to. So you may have missed the boat now because you've only got 10 days to send these repermissioning emails. So you're going to have to analyze whether you can continue to mail them because you have legitimate interest. And so in summary, these are the things that you really have to do. And if you want to write this down, this is what you actually need to do. In your CRM, you have to log your legal basis. On what reason can I store your data? You have to get consent for marketing. You have to log the date you got consent, and keep a register of all your decisions, how you came to them, and the reasons why you're doing it. Limit or exclude storing sensitive data. And a very good rule is if it doesn't feel right, it often isn't. And delete, delete, delete. So these are the resources which we'll share with you at the end. And now I'm going to just remind you, how do you eat an elephant? If you're feeling overwhelmed, just don't. It's fine. Just, tackle it one article at a time. Never mind one bite at a time. And then I'm going to hand you back to Carmel now, who's actually going to show you how to put it all into practice.
So just as I mentioned at the beginning, so what I'm just going to detail to you in the next maybe 10 minutes or so will be the GDPR requirements, primarily to do with individual rights, and also the lawful processing. So just show you how you can actually get that information from OnePageCRM or log it as such. So the next screen you'll see is my OnePageCRM account. So one of the key benefits of a CRM is about keeping track of your contacts, keeping track of your information. You need to be able to retrieve all your information easily. You need to be able to log it. So that's where, in addition to all the other benefits of having a CRM, that's where OnePageCRM comes into play when it comes to GDPR compliance. So as Andrea mentioned, subject access requests are definitely going to be more sought after. So I suppose, first of all, you need to detail how you are going to manage, when somebody does come to you and say, okay, I want all the information you have on me, you need to be able to easily pull that information together. So in OnePageCRM, let's say if Jill Ryan got in touch, she wants the information about her. Literally, it's just a quick, you tick on Jill's detail or on Jill's name, or you do a search and do a quick export, and then you get her data, in a file that you can pass on to the particular subject. In addition, I would always recommend as well, because subject access requests, while if you got one or two a year, or depending on your business, they might be easy to manage. But if you're getting lots and lots of them, it's important to be able to track, okay, who asked me for a subject access request. So let's say you need to make sure as well that you are able to fulfill this requirement within a particular time frame. So I would always suggest maybe using your custom fields here. So subject access request sent. So I put in 2 there, and they're both with date fields. So that way, if we go back to our main page and we click on to Jill Ryan, for example, and we go to edit, and we can then update this field. So for example, subject access, we received it today, and maybe we sent it on the 24th. So obviously you do this, you update this as you go along. But at a glance, you could see, okay, yes, Jill requested a subject access request information from us. And then let's say 6 months time again, she's, you can see here when was the last one, when was it requested. Then you can easily run filters based on those custom fields. Let's say you want to see how many you got for a particular month, you can easily do that as well. So just to make sure that you're not being inundated, sometimes you might need to even employ somebody if you're getting lots of them. It all depends on the nature of your business. And I think that's something that I suppose you will need to evaluate on your side. So if you update it as well, they update in real time. So you don't need to, you don't need to keep running this filter every single time. So that should find one, perfect. So that's the subject access request. In addition, the second one is the right to erasure. So I suppose one thing people do struggle with, and Andrea touched on it, is we're nearly scared to delete stuff. But you know, if you delete their information, you really will not contact them again, you know. So again, here to delete a contact is very straightforward. You just click here and you click on delete. Or if you need to do a search, maybe it's a whole company, you can again run a filter, find the company, and then delete their information. So you can do bulk deletes. So let's say the company is, let's scroll down here, or sorry, let's say you want to erase, or sorry, organization. Let's say OnePageCRM, for example. We found 4 and we want to delete everything about them. We just click here and the delete icon. In addition, so that's helping you fulfill your customers' requests. But for example, if you want your data and you want your information removed from our CRM system, you can delete your account very easily. So this is limited to the account owner, because it's to do with all of the data that you have within the CRM. So if we click here on the users and the billing page, and you can delete your account at any time. So just to let you know that that option is there available for you as well as a customer. The right to data portability, so the export. So again, you can do a full export of all of your contacts from the CRM. So you click here and go to contacts, and it gives you the option to export in Excel or a CSV file. So again, just making sure that you're able to get the data out of the CRM in order to pass it on to your data subjects if required. And then the last one I'm going to touch on is the right to rectification. So for example, Jill Ryan gets in touch and says, can you update my profile? So let's say I add in a new email address, and so let's say jill.ryan@icloud.com, or whatever the case may be. Or maybe you need to delete off this one because you've added the new one. So just again, it's about keeping everything up to date and updating when requested. So it's very easy when you have data in lots of different places. So combining them in one place is very, very important. And just keeping a log of everything as well. So you can see here, I edited the email address moments ago. And you, as our customer, you can update your details as well. So if you want to be able to update your details here, so for example, I want to change my email address, update my phone number, and as well if I want to update my billing details. Again, so sometimes if you're working in a company, you're the sales manager, you're busy doing sales, and so the accounts team, you can update maybe one of their email addresses here, but you'd still have access to all of your invoices within the CRM as well. So I think that's kind of the core ones for the subject, or for the individual user rights. The next one I'm just going to touch on as well is lawful processing. So again, the 3 major ones are the explicit consent, and Andrew gave us lots of information on those. I'm just going to kind of demo it to you a little bit and to put it into context, and how you use it with web forms, performance of contract, and of course legitimate interest as well. So the next screen you'll see is my, so let's say I'm using an email marketing app like MailChimp, and I suppose the reason I'm using MailChimp is that OnePageCRM are integrated with them. But I suppose 1 or 2 just kind of things I would like to mention is that you should always make it very obvious on how you got this person's details or their information. And you can do that very easily in apps like MailChimp. So for example, you know, remind people how you got on their list. So you just, this list description would go on the bottom of your campaigns, and then it would automatically pull in whatever information you have here. So that, let's say they receive the email from you, and then they read the email and they're thinking, I don't know anything about this. And then suddenly something triggers because you said, you're a customer of OnePageCRM and you opted in to receive emails on company and product updates. So we've been very, I suppose, transparent here. So you just need to make sure not to let them be second guessing. You know, you should only really be contacting the people that do want to hear from you. The other thing is you also need, you know, to have the unsubscribe and make it very clear that you can unsubscribe at any time. And also you can have a double opt-in as well, if you wish to do that. So for example here, the first case I'm just going to use, so let's say I have a new person here. So it's very easy, I suppose, for new cases, and I'm going to touch on re-permissioning as well. Just a sec. So let's say Jack Dawson. So here again, you need to make sure the default, so marketing consent, I want to receive emails on company and product updates. The default needs to be no, not yes. And that's the same for if it's, you know, a checkbox. So for consent, yes or no, two options, one or the other, it should be a drop down. But here, for example, and I've seen it happen actually to myself, because it's only when I went to update my preferences, I realized that I was opted in to a company's their Spanish newsletter, their Italian newsletter, and I don't speak those languages, so therefore I was very flabbergasted by them. So just make sure, you know, you are very clear when you're seeking this consent, what the different lists or the different groups that you're being added to. So you need to, you know, let's say you're a marketing agency, you know, list your products and list the different lists, I suppose, that you have, or the different groups that you have available. So because I'm using the OnePageCRM integration, if I come back here again, I can then, so I've set up my integration. So I'm Jack Dawson, for example. If I spell it correctly, it might help. So you see here, this is my contact created. Also, sorry, it actually gets tagged here as well. So, but if you just want, I'm just for, I suppose, simplicity here on today's session. So you can see there that I want to receive email updates on SEO and branding. So that field were brought directly into the CRM. And then my my second option actually, which was, go back here again, so we'll go to our web form, was the marketing consent. And I know I was playing around with that. So I suppose this is the key lesson, is that you do need your everything to be the exact same. So if I go in here to my CRM system and I go to my settings and custom fields, it needs to be the exact same text, the exact same options, and that's the only way that it will be mapped into your CRM system. So I'll look at that in a few moments. So that's the first way, and it's quite straightforward if they're new to your CRM. The second one, and it's, I was, as you can see, diagrams and that is not my forte, but I just was trying to think of it. So we've lots of people that use MailChimp and use our integration. So they currently have set up OnePageCRM to MailChimp, and that's to an existing list. So then you can send an email. So you can send a re-permissioning email, is what it's, I suppose, being called in the industry. But basically, you can only send that email if you have got consent from them at some point in the past. So like if even if, for example, it was an automatically ticked yes, but it was on your site, you know, it was clear. But you can't go re-permissioning people that were never asked to opt in the first place. So only for those that you did have some sort of consent received in the past, you can send them the email with the link to the web form, and then that's going to be fed into OnePageCRM so that it's updated, those details. And then you would need to set up, though, then disconnect this integration and set up your new integration with just your save filter for consent, and connect it with your new marketing list. So if anyone has any questions about that, I can definitely explain it in more detail and better detail. But if we go back here to my web form, let's say I have Jane Doe, Acme, so she's already there, or she's already in my OnePageCRM list. But because she's not already in my, let's say yes, and we'll say SEO and branding, subscribe to list. Again, we'll do the same. So now we'll see that Jane's profile will get updated. So she already exists in my CRM, but because you can't subscribe somebody to your list as such because they're already on there, you do need to connect it up to a new list and use a new web form. So you see here that this was updated here. And again, because I had that issue there with my custom field, it got mapped into the notes. But that's just to kind of give you a clear overview. You can get the fields updated. Then with the next two, performance of contract. So again, documentation is key, and making sure you're very transparent on where you're saying, you know, why data is being stored and where it's being stored and the reason. But for example, performance of contract, like they might be your customers, they might be status label is a customer in OnePageCRM, but you need to make sure that you've documented that somewhere. In addition as well, you need to be able to see, okay, so how long, maybe it depends on what you're selling, and again, everyone's situation is different. But let's say, for example, the status is their customer and they've been at that status and they've been in your CRM for, let's say date created is before, let's say is more than, I'm going to say 180 days ago. So that's 6 months ago. So again, you can drill down like certain things. And again, this is really useful as well for legitimate interest if you're prospecting. So 6 months. And so then you might look at them and say, okay, it was only a once-off purchase. Now 6 months for a customer might be short, depending on your particular scenario, but 6 months for a prospect, might be long, might be a long time. So again, just using these tools, my suggestion would be to come into your database and, okay, so let's say you have status of lead and see how long you have those leads in there. Let each person within your CRM account take ownership. So owner is Carmel, for example, and you'd go on there and put the status, and you can update and then delete, as Andrew said, delete as you go along. So they're kind of key areas that you should focus on, and make sure that you're documenting why and how you have their details in your CRM system. So it's all about provability. So that's it for me for now. So I'll just pass you over to Philipa, who will show you how to set up a legitimate interest, how to document it, and how it all works. So over to you, Philipa.
This is a great. Can you all hear me?
Yes, I can hear you perfect.
The ICO website, the Information Commissioner's Office website, is a fantastic resource. They have so many checklists and forms to download. So please go and have a look. The page on legitimate interest is amazing, and this is what we're going to concentrate on right now. We refer to it as a 3-part test, and Andrea did a great explanation of it. I was going to say to her, my golden rule is basically, if I say to you, would the person be surprised to hear from you in that context? And you say, yes, the person would be surprised. You shouldn't be using legitimate interest as a basis. So the official test is, and remember, if you are going to rely on legitimate interest as a basis, you need to document this. So in your privacy policy, you're saying we rely on legitimate interest in these and these scenarios. And if you would like to see documentation of the test, then go ahead and contact us. So you need a paper in your compliance file that basically has your justification on it. So we would say, there was the question about upselling on the Q&A, and I can use that as the scenario if that is all right. Let's just see this Q&A here. Let me open it. It's not considered reasonable for me to tell an existing client about other products that they might be interested in. Okay, so somebody has bought the yellow hat from me. Let's go back to that example. Somebody's bought the yellow hat from me, and I have them in the CRM as a previous customer. Now I've got some snazzy boots that I'd like to sell to them that go really well with the yellow hat. That's upselling to the customer. So I identify using the tags in the CRM, which are an amazing tool. You should be tagging everybody, to create your lists and to manage them. We identify a legitimate interest. What is the legitimate interest that we are identifying? It's our one that we are looking at now. We would like to make money as a business. We need to sell to make money. So the legitimate interest that we are pursuing is selling a product to a customer that would possibly be interested in it. Okay, so we write that down in plain English. Then we want to show that the processing is necessary to achieve it. So what is the processing? The processing is basically sending an email to market to them, if that is what we're going to do. So I would like to send an email with photos of the snazzy boots that match the yellow hat to the people who have bought the yellow hat. Is this processing necessary to achieve it? And I can say, okay, should I be phoning everybody? That's impossible. Should I be posting them a brochure? That's very expensive. So yes, I would say that the email is necessary. The processing via email is necessary to achieve my legitimate interest of selling to this prospect. Okay, then here comes the interesting bit. And this is quite easy for South Africans versed in this type of law because we are so used to balancing rights. This is how we learn law. Where coming into the European context, we're finding people are finding it quite difficult to do this balancing test. So basically, we want to balance the individual's interest, rights, and freedoms against our legitimate interest as a business. So what are the individual's rights, interests, and freedoms? They're not to be spammed, not to be hassled, not to be, just bombarded in their private space. So keep in mind your data subject sitting in their private space, and you are sending them an email about the boots that match the yellow hat. This is where the golden rule comes in. Would they be surprised to get that email from you? And we could say, possibly not. And we have to make a very strong justification here. So when you are looking at your upselling and trying to base this on legitimate interest, you have to have a very strong connection between the products and services that you are upselling. I'm just going to check the questions quickly to see if somebody has a question on that. Sorry, it's a bit difficult with only, okay, here. Sorry, guys. My children are just, they don't understand live feeds. Okay, right. Anybody got a question on legitimate interest, or you want to throw another scenario at me, or should we go to the other frequently asked questions?
Thanks for that, Andrea. That's really good as well, giving us the checklist. So there's lots and lots of questions coming through here. So I'm just trying to go through them and see if there's any legitimate interest ones. I think I'm not seeing anything that's standing out at me, but there's lots and lots here, so there probably is one.
They're not an existing customer. Let's do that one. Okay, so if you've researched a new prospect to sell to, it's targeted mailing, relevant to their role. Okay, relevant to their role, you're picking up on language from like Australian anti-spam law and Canadian anti-spam law. Okay, you've researched a new prospect, you found them on LinkedIn, you say this is the perfect person to sell to market to. There are other ways to directly market to people that are not electronic, and that's the link that I sent through. Look at the table towards the end of that page. You can phone them on their landline, or you can post to them. So this is where you have to weigh up when you do your campaigns. Are you going to be mass telephoning people? Are you going to save those for your high-end customers? And again, we go back to that 80-20 rule. And you're going to find out who you're going to make the most money from, and you're going to nurture that person. So you would want to make contact with them via another means, or, you know, really create that relationship with them on a platform like LinkedIn, comment on their articles, get to know them, and then ask their permission via the telephone or such to send them an email where you give them the options to subscribe to your mailing lists or your social media. Advice I've given to clients of mine has been to create a beautiful landing page depending on the group that you're targeting, where you say, this is what we do on the social media, these are our different email lists, you know, we send out product updates, we might send a newsletter or a weekly email that has a discount code, you know, sign up for that, and send people to that landing page to choose themselves whether or not they would like to be there. The B2B stuff, have a look at that direct marketing page. You can see my screen still, sorry, I've got, can you see the screen here? I'm scrolling down on the page. There, this summary here. Business contacts. You can post market with an opt-out. If it's a business contact, now this is where I'm saying the GDPR is causing a problem. If I'm emailing like Andrea at OnePageCRM, she is counting as an individual, not as a business contact at the moment until the e-privacy regulation gets sorted out. So business contact would be accounts at or info at marketing at. You can market, you can directly market to them electronically with an opt-out. So that's another way of getting to people that you would like to get to, is find out what the generic email addresses of the company, follow it up with a telephone call if it's worth that much to you. You can phone market to landlines. This is the National Do Not Contact Register, by the way. If you're not aware of it, you should be. So if people's names are on the Do Not Contact list, you know, you need to get them to opt in. If they're not on that list, you can market to them via the telephone with an opt-out, and again with fax marketing. Mobile phones for business contacts are the only ones that require an opt-in. So for now, that's the law as it stands, and I hope that helps somebody who's been asking questions here. Which other questions should we address? Should we go to that, or should we go over legitimate interest again?
Thanks for that, Andrea, and I think you've been answering some questions as we went along. So I think that kind of makes sense with the legitimate interest. I think people are wondering, so if you are trying to clean up all the time and you're deleting, so let's say I mentioned maybe to delete every so often, maybe every 6 months or a year of data that you don't need anymore, how do you know not to contact them again? So somebody has asked that question. So do you have any recommendations there, Philipa, on that type of scenario?
Yeah, you are permitted, actually you are required to keep a register of people that you can't contact, but we apply the data minimization principle again, and we say you only keep the data that is relevant to that scenario. So basically, to know who you shouldn't be contacting, you would be keeping a name and a unique identifier. just a basic like 2-field list, and every communication needs to be cross-referenced against that list. Unfortunately, data protection and data privacy is going to add on a 20 or 30% extra time to every task that you do for the next little while. So that's part of the change management that we consult on, is to say to business owners or to bosses, CEOs, boards of directors, just be aware of the fact that everybody in the business is affected while you're getting your head around this, and budget for the extra time. Yeah, the golden rule here for Tim is definitely everything must have an opt-out. It might seem ridiculous for small businesses. It's a huge burden, but what it is going to do, and let me tell you, there's a very, very positive slant to this, is it's going to force you to think about the data that you're collecting, and it's going to force you to think about the value of the prospect that you are holding in your hand. So if it's somebody, you can't take the shotgun approach in marketing anymore. You have to have a very directed and very thought out process going on, and it will make your business more profitable. That's just a natural side effect of data protection. You'll be forced to do this, and you will do better in your business.
That's great, Philipa, and I do agree. It is about just getting kind of systems in place, and you'll have less leads, but you'll have more customers. So I think overall it seems probably daunting at the moment, but it is definitely it's going to be good. And you even think about your own situation as well, that if people are just randomly ringing you up and you're thinking, what, if you have no interest. So again, as I think you mentioned yesterday, and to myself, that put yourself in their shoes and think about, do I want to receive this email from this person?
Exactly.
So
exactly. Yeah.
That's important. Some other questions. So if you just want to cover maybe just one or two of the FAQs you received before the webinar, and then anybody that has asked questions, we've got lots here. We will follow up with you afterwards.
Okay. But if you are doing a lot of marketing and you're sending out a lot of communication to people, that would be a risk, in the sense that somebody is going to complain, or somebody's going to say, where did you get my details from? How did you find me? So you have to have all of that in mind when you decide on your risk appetite, what's there. Sorry, I'm just thinking of some practical examples of the people that I've worked with. Risks to companies, definitely the marketing, the public face, your website. So where people are seeing you online, is your website covered by a privacy policy? And the biggest one of all is, can you facilitate subject access requests? So if somebody comes to you on the 25th, next Friday, and says, what data do you have on me? Do you have the formal procedure in place? Do you have a form that they can fill out? Remember, you can't force them to use a form, but can you handle that, and can you deal with it within 30 days? The other biggest risk to the company is, and this is a really, really scary one for a lot of people, the biggest risk is, Stephen, generally I don't wear makeup either, but sometimes you just have to do what you have to do. Okay, so back to the real stuff. Biggest risk to the company. I've forgotten what I was saying. Oh, data breaches. This is the scary one. Lots of the cybersecurity guys will say to you, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and most people have been hacked already. And a data breach is not just about being hacked. It's losing papers, it's losing a file, it's misplacing a phone at the airport, or losing a laptop. So from that perspective, if you have to do the assessment of the incident, let's call it an incident, within 72 hours, because you've got 72 hours to decide whether or not it should be reported, whether you should be reporting to your data subjects. 72 hours is a tiny amount of time. So if you lose your laptop today, would you be able to say exactly what personal data is on that laptop? Would you be able to make the assessment as to whether you should be reporting it or not? Would you even know where to begin? So that is a huge risk to a lot of people. Make sure that you can, that your devices, your mobile devices, if you're moving around with them, are locked down. You can remotely wipe them. That's a very practical step that you can take before next Friday. So public face, website policies, privacy policies, be able to facilitate subject access requests, and make sure that your devices are locked down. I'm a US-based company, but anyone can sign up to my website, get daily email updates. What best practice would you recommend? If you're a US-based company, most likely you're getting Canadian people signing up to your list as well. And Canadian anti-spam law is really, really strict. So basically, best practice is allowing people to opt out on every single email. as far as possible, allow them to self-manage themselves on the list. That's where MailChimp, etc., is really great. People can log on and self-manage. And then the golden rule is being able to prove consent. So where a lot of people have had consent before, they are re-permissioning now, and that goes to one of the questions here, consent and re-permissioning lists. Is it necessary to re-permission contacts? If you can't prove that you got the person's consent after the 25th of May, you're going to be in a bit of a sticky situation. So people are relying on a legitimate interest basis. You know, if they know they had consent before, they're relying on a legitimate interest basis to re-permission, so they have the correct amount, the correct level of consent. So best practice is make sure that you have lists of people, you know, the lists of consents, and that's where the OnePageCRM was being shown earlier on, that you can record that consent. MailChimp, etc., will allow you to record consent. You have to be able to show that if you're relying on consent. Okay, can you get consent verbally recorded? Yeah, if you are making calls. Okay, just remember now, these automated telephone messages, we record these calls for training purposes. People are allowed to object to that. So basically, you're not allowed to just blanket say we're recording calls for training purposes. If you're like an insurance broker and you have to prove certain things for a contract, then sure, record the call, inform the person exactly why the call is being recorded. And just remember that they might actually want to object to having the call recorded. So yeah, you can get the consent verbally recorded. It would be very acceptable. And just make sure you're telling the person that you're recording. Okay, so where do I start with being GDPR compliant for my own company? I answered that briefly in the questions there. And I said policies and procedures, staff training is so important, having the forms in place, you know, just knowing whether or not you have to register with the Data Protection Commissioner. Go look on the dataprotection.ie website, see if you need to register, if you fall into one of the categories. If you need to keep records of your processing activities under Article 30, the ICO has some great spreadsheets available on that. Just look for records of processing and just see if you fall into the tests there, and appointing a data protection coordinator if you don't have to appoint a data protection officer. Having a data protection committee within the company so that you spread the workload, as was said right at the beginning, which is great, and making sure that it's an agenda item for every meeting that the company has. Okay, right. It may seem like overkill for micro businesses, and that's where I would say to you, well, what is your risk appetite and where do you sit on the supply chain? You know, if you look at the supply chain, you're going to start getting pressure of all kinds of things coming from South Africa, where the economy is quite massive. You know, you've got a population officially of 50 million people, unofficially of 80 million people, coming to Ireland with a population of 4.5 million people. Things get scaled down a lot. So business is sometimes very informal here, and people don't do things like have employee contracts. You know, I come from a commercial background where there's pressure along the supply chain to prove all kinds of things, tax clearance, you know, certain kinds of statuses within the business. And that's where most of my clients are coming from at the moment, is they're getting pressure from the multinationals that they're servicing. So it might be a two-man operation who's providing a SaaS service to a multinational. They have to prove that they are compliant. So you have to decide, where do you sit on the supply chain, and is it going to really affect your business or kill your business if you can't prove compliance? You know, this is the world that we live in now, and we have to adapt and get used to it. Okay.
So thank you for that, Andrea, and all those insights as well. They're really, really good. I'm just conscious of the time. Yep. So I think, well, we still have nearly everybody still here on the webinar, which is great. But I think, is there any kind of final comments or anything you'd like to make, Philipa, just to kind of finish up? And we can, I'll be sure to get back to everybody that's attended today's session. We will be sending you on the GDPR cheat sheet and also a recording, so we might just edit it a small bit, and also I'll post some links here as well in the chat window. So Philipa, if you want,
can I just answer one of these Q&As just very quickly? What happens when a customer requests for the information to be deleted, but they have outstanding payments? That's been a question from everybody. The right to be deleted is a very limited right, and we didn't touch on a legal obligation. as a grounds for processing. You are well within your rights to say we are not deleting you until your invoice is paid. And by the way, if we have a revenue audit within the next 6 years, we are going to have to produce this information for the revenue audit. So the data retention period for that kind of information would actually be basically 6+1 years for a revenue audit. There are certain requirements under law to keep HR data as well. So for your business, you have to go and make sure you know what those legal obligation, those data retention periods are. Last thoughts are just make sure that by next Friday you can handle requests from the public and you have some idea of what should be in your policies, who your third-party processors are, and you as the data controller have to be sure that the people that you are using as a data processor are compliant with the law. There's joint and several liability, and the very last comment I'm going to make is this is not to scare people, but just be aware of it. They're under the data protection bill, the Irish data protection bill, that is well on its way to coming into force very soon. There is liability, personal liability for directors of fines of 50,000 each, directors, managers, and officers of the company, as well as perhaps 5 years in jail. So the consequences are huge under the domestic law that's coming into place. Okay.
Super. Thank you very much, Philipa. And we really appreciate you coming on board. Questions are always the tricky one. And it's always good to have somebody that has that wide range of experience in the industry. And also thanks to Andrea as well for coming on and giving us that really good overview and, you know, touching on lots and lots of important points there. But I suppose what we can take away as well is that, you know, just sit down and start looking at all of the data, start deciding or looking at where you're storing it, why you're storing it, and don't be afraid to delete it. So OnePageCRM, from our perspective as well, we will be having our terms of service, updated terms of service over to our customers by the end of next week. So we'll be following up with you then. And if there's any other questions or feedback, I think you all know where we are at this point as well. So support@onepagecrm.com. We're happy to answer all of your questions. Don't worry, GDPR, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. And once you embrace it and maybe seek some assistance and some help from, you know, somebody like Philipa or Philipa, and it will actually break things down and make things a lot easier. So thanks again, everybody, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Bye-bye.